Welcome to the Beginner Photography Podcast. Today we're learning all about working with models from a model. So let's get into it.
Welcome to the Beginner Photography Podcast, a weekly podcast for those who believe that moments matter most and that a beautiful photo is more than just a sum of its settings. A show for those who want to do more with the gear they have to take better photos today. And now, your host, Raymond Hatfield.
Oh, welcome back to this week's episode of the podcast. As always, I'm Raymond Hatfield, excited to be here. Today we got a good one. It's been one heck of a week for me. I actually had an engagement session. It went great, but it was interesting because, very often couples want to shoot like in a foresty or like a natural location. And when you shoot kind of in these heavily wooded areas, then the light from the trees it's green, right? Because it's from the leaves. The light is bouncing off leaves, so the light is green. And that always leaves your subject's skin also green. And then sometimes they look sick, and that's never what you want for your couples during an engagement session. So I actually asked many of you in the Beginner Photography Podcast Facebook group about your struggles when it comes to editing, and many of you said skin tones, oddly enough. It's like your subject is either too green that they look sick, or they're just Oompa Loompa orange, and there never seems to be any sort of in between. So to help you out, I've been working on just a free email challenge on how to make editing skin tones simple. Now, I'll have more info all on that next week, but just know that help is on the way, and it's going to be good stuff. Promise. Speaking of good stuff, this week I chat, you like that segue? This week I chat with St. Louis portrait photographer Tori Wright, who actually got behind the camera after being in front of it as a model for 10 years. Yeah. So she has a ton of helpful tips about working with models that I know you are going to love in this interview. And as always, I save a portion of the interview where we talk about business and making money with your camera just for premium members. So this week, premium members will learn how Tori booked her first paid shoot as a photographer, where you should be to book models for your next shoot, and how much to pay models that you're working with, and what it is that you need to give them. So a ton on offer here today. If you want to hear not only Tori, but also past guests' best tips on getting clients and making money with your camera, then you can become a premium member today by clicking the premium membership link at the top of the page at beginnerphotographypodcast.com. Now with that, let's go ahead and get on into this interview with Tori Wright. You were in front of the camera as a model for 10 years before getting behind it and becoming the photographer yourself. So what was it about the camera that after being on set for 10 years, you thought, you know what, I want to give this photography thing a try?
It's really weird because I never thought that I would become a photographer. I mean, I've always been a creative in general, but I never thought that I would go down the photography route. It all really started when I was modeling and I would have to take pictures for my agent, and they would say, send me a picture of you doing this or you doing that. And I didn't have a lot of people around me, so I would kind of just take these pictures. And then I started traveling and taking pictures, all over the world. And then when it came down to it, sorry, what was the question?
When did you think to yourself, you know what? Okay. I think I'm going to put the brakes on this modeling thing and try out photography?
Right. So when it came back to photography, I was just like, I really love it. It just combines like all of the creative things that I love. It's got a little bit of technical parts to it. It's got the creative parts to it. And you just get to make pretty pictures for social media and for wherever. And so I just kind of phased into it after learning to take pictures for myself and just taking them for my modeling portfolio. And then I started to take them of other people, and I just got so inspired every single time I took a picture. I'm like, okay, wow, this is really something.
Did you start off with like just your cell phone, or did you start off just straight in buying a DSLR?
I had a DSLR that I got in college, and I did not know how to use it. So I learned on YouTube in like 2 weeks, but still didn't know how to use it. Tried to take some pictures like blowing glitter. You remember that time when you would like blow glitter? None of them worked out, and I was just cleaning up glitter for hours and days and months. But yeah, I had that one. I never knew how to use it. So it pretty much just sat on a shelf. And then when I started to really get into photography, I was like trying to play with it again. I'm like, you know what, this is just not working. So I bought a new mirrorless camera and just like all the best things that I could buy. And I was just like, okay, yeah, this is completely different. This is like a whole new world. Shooting with like modern technology.
What was there something about the mirrorless camera that really helped solidify how photography worked for you?
Um, I don't. I think it was just like the sharpness in the way that it was focusing, because I was shooting on a 1.4. I had a prime lens on my Nikon DSLR, and I was trying to just shoot everything at 1.4 like all beginners do, and I couldn't get anything in focus, and I couldn't figure it out. So when I switched over to the mirrorless, I couldn't afford the 1.4 lenses because, you know, they're pretty pricey on the newer cameras. So I had to get like a 1.8, and just like that small change in depth, I was able to just get more in focus. And I'm like, okay, well, maybe I just don't need to shoot at 1.4. Maybe that's the problem. And it took buying a whole new system of cameras to figure that out.
It's a very expensive lesson to learn, isn't it?
Yeah, but
So,
I'm very happy. I'm very happy. I would never go back.
right. It's weird. As somebody who I've also been shooting mirrorless for a long time now, it just seems so strange to go back to just like the traditional, prism finder, just looking out through the lens and not being able to see that accurate representation of what you're going to capture before you grab the photo. That's so before you made the upgrade, right? Before you switched and you're still trying to figure this whole thing out and these photos aren't turning out the way that you wanted. Would you say that was there anything in particular that you struggled with most, aside from this whole depth of field thing? Was there anything else that you really thought to yourself, why am I just not getting this?
No, I think my experience as like a model, just knowing how to frame things and knowing how to take portraits in general, really made it easy for me. But I was just pulling them up on my computer and they just were not in focus, and it was driving me crazy. And I'm just like, this is the shot, but it's not in focus, so it's trash.
And that was all attributed to the very shallow depth of field?
Pretty much, yeah, because I didn't know anything. I just knew the photography trick was to shoot as wide open as you could. But yeah, if you just want like the shoulder in focus,
Or
yeah,
the
that's
nose
good.
and not the eyes. That's my least favorite. Like whenever I put the camera, in autofocus and just put it on like face tracking and it gets the nose and not the eyes, I'm so disappointed. I'm like,
Yeah.
why would you think that? Why would you think that? So obviously being a model, you'd been in front of the camera, many times, many times. Would
Yeah.
you say that before you actually picked up the camera that maybe there was a preconceived idea of how easy or how hard photography was for you?
Um, yeah, I think that the transition felt easy. It didn't feel like it was something that I couldn't do because I was always around photographers and working on sets and stuff like that. And I had come a long way as a model, starting like 10 years ago when Model Mayhem was like the best way to find photographers to work with. And I was shooting with anybody and everybody. And, probably not the best decisions that I've made, going to photographers' basements I didn't know of and taking pictures. And so I learned pretty quickly after sending these pictures to my agent, which pictures are good and which pictures are bad. And I was able to sort of like filter through what makes a good picture and a bad picture. So coming into photography, I already knew that because I learned that from the other side of the camera.
What were some of those things? What were some of the things that you thought, oh, this makes a bad photo and versus this makes a good photo?
Well, it's more specific to my type of photography, like when it comes to like taking portraits of models for their portfolio, just like things that are just getting a little bit too artsy or just like too dark or too much of a theme or too costumey. When I'm taking pictures, I'm trying to sell the model. And sometimes when I was taking pictures in the past, I thought they were really cool pictures, but they weren't doing anything to sell me as a model to get me more jobs. They were just cool pictures.
Interesting, interesting. Do you think that's an issue that many new photographers have, is that they have these lofty ideas of a shoot and then it doesn't really benefit the model at all, or maybe that the idea isn't fully fleshed out?
Yeah, I think definitely. I mean, and there's things like when I shoot with models and I'm just going to be like, hey, we're going to shoot for your portfolio, but we're also going to do a look that's just going to be really fun just for like Instagram or something, because like Instagram and like professional photos that models need for their portfolio, they can be completely different. There's like two different worlds, Instagram models and then like professional models. So I'm just telling them, we're going to do this completely different. And it's okay to get artsy and do all of these things. But I feel like sometimes you have to take a step back and make sure your focus is on your model.
Hmm. And how, as a photographer now, how do you do that?
So really I just talk to them, and a lot of times they do have portfolios since I'm just at the beginner phase. So they come to me for updates and just like little mini updates to what they already have, add-ons. And so I ask them always, what roles do you get cast for? And I take that role and I kind of create like a setting for this character that they get cast for, and I shoot that.
Okay, so what about, I love that. First of all, I mean, that's great. That's going to make the model, I'm sure, feel very comfortable and excited to work with you because they know that they're going to get something out of it. But as a photographer, is there some sort of creative aspect to it for you where you're thinking like, man, I have this really cool idea for a shoot. I really want to get a model for this. And maybe it doesn't benefit the model. Is that even a question? Like, does that make sense where I'm going with that?
Yeah. So I think that everything always benefits the model, but it may not benefit their portfolio. So for example, let's say that they're a newer model and they don't have much experience. Just getting in front of the camera and working with a new photographer, and just, if you are going down the creative route, getting them to kind of step out of their box a little bit is always good experience for that model. So that can benefit them. And like I said, I shoot some things that are creative and I'm just like, your agent is not going to like this, but this is going to get published. So that's kind of also experience and can benefit the model just to say that they were published.
Yeah. Oh, I bet it'd be I mean, as a photographer, it's great to say that you've been published, in all of these magazines as well. I can't imagine for a model. Just quick question. I just thought of this. If you had to guess, a lot of people say that like photography is a very saturated industry. Would you say that the modeling side is more saturated than the photographer side?
Oh, that's a tough question. I would say yes. I would say everybody is a model now, especially with in Instagram days, and there's lots of photographers out there, and especially now that you can be a photographer with just your cell phone, I would say it's pretty even because the people who are modeling for these cell phone photographers are also models, right?
Yeah, that's true. That's true. So that kind of brings me to my next question here, which is, well, first of all, I kind of want to get into the shooting side of it here, which is, are you right now? Now I know that you've been doing this. You've made the transition for about how long now? How long have you been focusing more on photography rather than the modeling side?
Well, I still did both.
Oh, okay. Well, how long have you been, I guess, more focused? Where's your focus at right now?
Well, it's kind of funny because in some days in the mornings, I will have a photo shoot where I'm modeling, and in the afternoon, I will go and be taking photos of somebody else.
Do you like that? Do you want to continue doing that, or is there one side?
It's really, really weird. But you know what? I feel like doing both has increased my skills in both. So I work with other models as a photographer, and that makes me a better model. And then working with other photographers as the model has, when I'm there, they teach me so many things, and I've learned so many things on set, never thinking that I was going to ever apply them to photography, but I am, and I'm still learning on set. So don't think that I would give up either.
Do you have an example of something that you've learned on set that you brought into your own business here?
Oh man, so many. A lot of them are more like things that should be on set, whereas like, you need stuff like places to hang your clothes. When I'm designing my studio, I know that I always come to photo shoots with like bags and bags of clothes and hangers. And so I'm putting that, as soon as you walk in the door, there's going to be like a rolling bar and a space for you to hang your clothes. So that's just something that I picked up. But I was working with a photographer that actually shot my very first modeling portfolio 10 years ago.
Oh, wow.
So he was shooting me for a local brand just the other day. And I was telling him how, he inspired me to become a photographer, whether he knew it or not, like everything I learned from working with him back then, I'm using today. And he was giving me just like so many more tips, like for flooring, you can just like paint vinyl from the hardware store on planks, or not planks, on rolls.
Mm-hmm.
You can just paint that and you can just have interchangeable flooring drops. I'm like,
Whoa.
genius.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I would not have known that. I would not have known that. What about from the modeling side though? As a model interacting with other photographers, what has been something that that you've picked up in a way to interact with other models that now you're working with?
I think just like comfort in telling people how to pose. I know I told you this at the beginning. When I was working with photographers in the past, sometimes they'll give you every single pose they'll tell you to do it. It's like, okay, now turn your head like this and put your hand on your head and your other hand on your hip and arch your back. And they'll literally pose you in every single shot. And so it kind of is hard because you're just waiting for them to pose you because they're automatically the boss now and they're telling you how to pose. And so it's just kind of like weird because you don't know what to do without their instructions, even though you can fully model, but that's just that sort of like photographer relationship. So I've sort of learned from that because I don't like being posed like that. So when I'm working with models now, I tell them maybe a pose to get into, but then I'll say, okay, but like shake it out and make it your own, or I'm going to let you pose. And then since you can't see what's in my camera, you can't see the angle or the perspective, I'm just going to shift you just a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
So I like to let them feel in charge, but if I need to pose them a little bit, I make sure that they shake it up so they're not feeling stiff and they know that they have the freedom to do whatever they want as far as posing.
Shake it up. Shake it up. I like that because I think when I first got started, and I know that many others when they first get started as well, you get the camera when you think to yourself, I got to get some people in front of the camera, and you go to your neighbors, your friends, your family, whatever it is, and you realize, oh man, these people just don't have the enthusiasm or the photogenicness, quality from my subjects that I wish that I had. Oftentimes that first thought is, man, I should get a model because models obviously know what they're doing and they know how to pose. But from the photography perspective right here, how important is it for you to understand the posing side of it versus letting the model kind of just do their own thing?
So I think that posing is definitely important, especially because when you're looking through your camera, you can see what they see. And sometimes one of my tricks is like to let them pose, but then to show them on my camera, hey, this is what this is looking like. It looks good, but you need to just like shift it. But a lot of people come to me that have never modeled before, and just being able to pose them, they really love that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I'm not like posing them like I mentioned before, like telling them exactly how to put every single arm and leg, and I don't tell them how to do that. I just give them moods and vibes, and then I show them personally. I think that's probably what I'm getting at. I personally show them the pose because I'm a model, and so I can just do whatever, and then they can replicate that, but like in their own body motions, in their own level of comfortability, and they're able to get the shot. So I think that knowing how to pose as a model definitely helps people who aren't models and helps you really get the shot.
Okay, so let's talk about posing for a little bit. Or do you have some simple, can you give me an example of maybe something that you shot for recently? Was it like a brand thing? Was it for a portfolio? Let's just work with an example here.
As a model or a photographer?
You as the photographer.
Okay. Let's see. With a non-model or a model?
Well, I guess where I'm getting at here is like, like where would you start with this whole thing? If you were to show up as the photographer and you have a model in front of you, and let's say that you're working with a clothing brand, what's kind of the first? Is there a go-to pose that you start off with and then just kind of build on from there? Are there a set series of body looks that you go for?
Okay, yeah, so I'll talk about specifically shooting for portfolios. So when it comes to portfolios, I try to get certain poses and certain like framings with each outfit. And it really depends on the type of outfit and the type of model that you're working with. So if you're working with like a commercial model, I would start them just like walking and laughing. That's always a really easy one to start with, just very candid shots. And then we would just move to like headshots, sitting shots. I try to do those on every single look. It's going to be like a headshot, a sitting shot, a 3/4 shot, and like a motion shot. And then the posing just comes along with whatever. I mean, if it's going to be a fashion one, you're going to have to get a lot of motion. It's going to depend on the dress, the wardrobe, whether it's styling on hair. It's sort of like interacting with whatever you're promoting in your photos. That's where I start.
Okay, so if I know that there's kind of, I don't know, I don't want to say two schools, but it seems like when I see a lot of modeling photos, they're either very lifestyle or they're very, very posed, like high fashion. You know what I mean? Would you say that as a photographer that there's that those are two different routes to go on, or that you need to be pretty versatile in both?
Um, Two different routes. Yes, they're definitely different routes, but I think that they are somewhat aligned. And a lot of times I feel like you can just change it up depending on the wardrobe and a smile. So if you want something to be not fashion or not lifestyle, we just tell them like, don't smile. And as soon as you smile, even if you have them like in a nice dress, it becomes lifestyle.
Well, that's very quick and easy. I like that. I like that. That really does change it up quite a bit with very minimal effort. Now, if you are, I guess first off, as a photographer, are you working more with? Because this is going to lead into my next question. I'm sorry for this build up right here, which is, as the photographer, are you working with paying clients, or is this like spec type stuff? I'm very new to this whole world of working with models, so I don't even know if I'm using the right terminology here.
So it depends. I am lucky enough that I had a hookup with my agency, so they were able to send me models when I was building portfolio for myself. So I got to work with a lot of models early on that are professional, and now I am working with models and they are paying me. And I'm also working with people who want to be models because I do have that experience on the other side of the camera. They really appreciate that I can help and teach them at the same time. And then I work with people who are not models at all and have not any idea of becoming a model, but just want really nice headshots.
Okay,
That make them look like a model, but they don't want to go down the model.
Oh, that's what I want. I got to come down to St. Louis. That's exactly what I want. I don't want to be a model at all. Okay, so let's say that you have this idea for a shoot, right? And now it's time for you to reach out to a model. I guess first question is, how do you find the right model for whatever your vision is? And then as a model, what information do you need from the photographer when being pitched a shoot idea?
So I find a lot of my models through Instagram solely, and I am really connected here in St. Louis as far as modeling goes because, like I said, I've been doing this in St. Louis for 10 years or more, and I've worked with a lot of different models on set. So a lot of times I can just call up a friend, but if I have a specific project and I want to look for a model, I would go to the modeling agencies, starting with my own that I model for because I'm the most connected with them. But yeah, and pretty much I just say, hey, I have this idea. This is what it's going to be. I have a couple ideas right now. But I'll just say, I was invited to shoot at this place and I have this like grand idea and this is what I'm going for. And a lot of models will just say absolutely yes. And it's not a big deal.
Okay, so if somebody's just starting and maybe they're not as well connected in the modeling industry as you are, you would say reaching out on Instagram is a great place to start?
Anybody on Instagram will model for you.
Okay, so then where do you get started from there? You shoot them a message, and then that goes into my next question, which was, as a model, what information do you like to know when being pitched for a shoot idea?
Yeah, I made a joke with my friend. I said, hey, I'm coming into town and let's get together for a coffee and then maybe we can do a photo shoot. They're like, how do you know I want to do a photo shoot? I said, everybody wants to do a photo shoot. But pretty much I just pitched to them my ideas, the dates in general, if I don't have a specific date. And I'm really flexible and I'm trying to say, you know, what days work for your availability, like weekdays, weekends, you know, just so I can plan everything. And sometimes I'll send them like little mood boards or stuff like that that can sort of give them a vision of what I'm going for. If you're going to start getting really creative, I think it's definitely important to show the model what you're wanting to shoot before like having them come here to your studio or wherever you're going to shoot and say, by the way, you're going to be wearing lingerie today and we're going to paint you and you're going to be wearing this crazy hair and makeup for a Halloween shoot. You know, it's definitely important to let them know as much details as possible when it comes to planning these things and reaching out to them, because you don't want them to be like surprised when they get there, because that will make them uncomfortable.
Oh, okay. That makes sense. So when it comes to a mood board, which I love that idea, do you just make something in Pinterest and send it to them or something else?
Yeah, a lot of times just Pinterest. Sometimes I'll build a whole board out for a shoot if I already have the idea and I'm just looking for the model. And sometimes I have just screenshots on my phone and then I'll be going through Instagram and I'll be like, this person is perfect for this type of shoot that I want to do. So I'll send them that image that was just a screenshot and say, hey, are you interested in doing a photo shoot that sort of looks like this?
Okay, I love that. That makes sense. So then let's kind of shift gears here and talk a little bit about the business side of
Okay.
the photographer and model relationship. You mentioned there just a few minutes ago, sometimes you pay models, sometimes models pay you to work with you. So before we get into that, let's start with that first paid shoot that you had with a model. I want to know how that went. How did you book it? Were you nervous? And how did it turn out? Hey, we're going to get right back into this week's interview, but quick, I want to let you know that this episode of the podcast is sponsored by thecontractvault.com, your all-access pass to photography-specific contracts. Stop trying to make those general contract templates that you found on Google work for you and get the contracts that you truly need. Your business deserves better than basic, trust me. Visit thecontractvault.com and use promo code BPP for 20% off your first month. That's promo code BPP for Beginner Photography Podcast. Now look, I know that the legal stuff, it seems scary and it seems expensive, but it doesn't have to be either of those, honestly, because finally we have the Contract Vault. The Contract Vault provides all access to reliable contract templates specific to the photography industry. And on top of the contracts, you also get access to the members-only Facebook group where Andrea Sager, the founder, teaches live every single month to provide even more legal help for your growing photography business. So whether you've made $100 or booked your first $1,000 wedding, or maybe you're even bringing in $100,000 a year with your camera, that's awesome. You're still responsible for all of the legal stuff, just like Fortune 500 companies are. But obviously the big difference between you and a Fortune 500 company is that you probably are not groomed for the position of CEO, CFO, CTO, and general counsel. Even though it's just you, you're still responsible for all of those positions. The Contract Vault aims to arm you with all the legal knowledge in order to help you steer clear of potential lawsuits. Awesome. So sign up now at thecontractvault.com and use promo code BPP. Again, that's promo code BPP for Beginner Photography Podcast to take 20% off your first month and get your hands on the contract templates and legal knowledge that you need for your business. One last time, that's promo code BPP for 20% off your first month at thecontractvault.com. All right, let's get back into this week's interview. So obviously we just talked a lot about how to pay your model, where to find models and all that stuff, which was just fantastic information. But let's take a step back from that. And as the photographer, I guess kind of the bigger question is, when do you know that you're ready to work with a model or not?
Well, like I said, there are models on all different levels, from your your neighbor's daughter who likes to model, to professional models that are working in agencies, to worldwide models that are traveling all over the world and all on the cover of Vogue and that sort of thing. So I feel like at any point, you should be ready to work with a model as long as you're confident enough, because you can also learn a lot from working with a model. Someone who's comfortable in front of the camera is a huge deal, versus like trying to get your brother to take pictures for you.
Do you have any tips on getting new models comfortable in front of the camera?
I would just say, you be comfortable and they'll be comfortable. Let them know what you're wanting to do so they can, you can work towards a common goal. And I think that music also really helps.
Oh,
So
okay.
I always bring like a little speaker with me, and it attaches to my camera bag with a little hook. And I always ask the model, what type of music do you like to listen to? And so they'll tell me, and I'll put that on through Spotify. And so their favorite song will be playing, and all of a sudden they're just so much more comfortable and relaxed and, happy to be there.
That is a great tip. I've always seen those little, like, I don't know, JBL speakers or whatever with the carabiner clip on them. And I always thought to myself, like, who uses these? But now, like, that totally makes sense as to why you might want to use it. And I might even pick one up for my camera bag for engagement sessions. I like that tip. Thank you very much for sharing that.
You're welcome. Yeah, music makes a huge difference.
What about saying, somebody who is, brand new to modeling again, and maybe isn't comfortable with posing? I know you talked a little bit earlier about you having the experience of being a model. What, again, situation is somebody brand new to modeling just walks in front of your camera and says, I'm ready for this, but kind of nervous. What would you tell them?
Like as far as they're struggling to kind of like get to posing.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. What would you tell them?
Well, a lot of times when I'm building out a shoot for a particular person, I will create a mood board. And sometimes these mood boards have poses in them. Like, we're not going to shoot this idea, but look at this pose. And so I always have that on Pinterest, and I send that model that link and I say, hey, look at this, as far as like mood and vibes, but also posing ideas. And so then when it comes to actually shooting, I can pull up that picture again and I can say, hey, remember this picture? Let's try to do this look. And I do have the experience as a model that I can go into the pose myself. Like, I set my camera down and I'm like, okay, now do this. And so they're able to, mimic me. But really, it's just kind of working with them and just kind of teaching them little tricks like, okay, don't be so stiff, keep switching it up. Even if it's just like shifting back and forth your weight from one leg to another, it's just going to be working with them. And they will eventually learn. But yeah.
It's really something as simple as just like weight from one leg to the other. That can make a huge difference.
It can be, yeah. Just because you're like swaying, just hips one to the other.
I can see with the camera in your hand that you're just swaying right there, and it looked very natural. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like, let's say you're doing one pose and your weight's on one side, like you can just switch it up and throw your weight to the other side, and that's 2 poses.
Yeah.
And then start moving your arms around and everything's a new pose.
Okay, I like that. Can you talk to me a little bit about TFP? Because that's a term that I hear all the time. I've seen from obviously models, I've seen from photographers. Can you tell me kind of what it is and your views on it?
So when I learned it, it was time for prints, but nobody really prints pictures anymore.
Sure, yeah.
So I guess it's time for pictures or time for photos. I don't know. But basically it means it's like a trade shoot. So you work with a model and the model works with you. The new word is also like collab. Let's do a collaboration. Yeah. So it pretty much just means it's free. You're not getting paid. The model's not getting paid, and you just get together and work and take pictures. And then in theory, you should send those pictures to the models, but sometimes that doesn't happen because it was a free shoot. So not saying that I haven't personally done that, but as a model on the other side, there has been photographers that would want to do a time for print shoot, and then you just never get the pictures because it was free. So it's not on your level of priority, It's not a top priority to get those edited. So
Well, let's talk about that for a minute because obviously being a model, starting off, 10 plus years ago, what are just some good practices that as new photographers who are listening who want to start working with models should and should not do?
should and should not practices.
Obviously, we should be sending photos to the model, but what are some other things that we should be doing and what are some things that we should not be doing?
Man, that's a tough question. Well, I could say as a photographer, there are some things that you should be doing, and this is not just for models, but this is a tip from a model, is that when you're working with somebody, that you should always give them like a little checklist of the things that they need to do before a shoot. And some of those should include like, make sure your nails are painted like completely or not at all. Make sure that you're bringing these sorts of things to your photo shoot for like touch-ups on your makeup. I always say, make sure that your clothes are ironed. That is my biggest pet peeve, when people show up without ironed clothes and they're just like in a ball in a suitcase. So I always give anybody that I'm shooting a checklist, and I say, do this the night before you shoot, and it's going to make everything go so much smoother the next day.
And is that just like, is it the same list that you send to everybody or does it change?
It's the same list. And the times that I don't send it, will be to like my friend that's a model. And I kid you not, they come with like their nail polish. It was an editorial and they come with their nail polish, like 3 different colors and like chipped. I'm like, cool. So I'm going to have to Photoshop each and every one of your nails.
That always takes up so much time. I would
Don't
imagine.
expect that they know. And I feel like that's also just a good way to elevate your photos.
Yeah. What about now the reverse, I guess? What are some things as a photographer that or as a model, what are some things that you saw photographers do that other photographers should not be doing?
Oh man, it's really hard.
I can see in your eyes that there's
really
a billion things.
Okay, so my biggest thing is like these photographers that pretty much try to get every model like naked because that's like a look. But it's really not. I feel like as a woman, as a photographer, that has like, and also who has been a model, that has been a huge thing for me, because a lot of people will come to me saying, like, I'm shooting with you because you're a woman, and I feel more comfortable because in the past they have shot with photographers, and then the photographers say, to get like half naked is fashionable when it's,
Creepy.
not really. Creepy.
Yeah. All right. So I guess maybe this isn't a show for models, but as a model, like, what do you do in that situation? Because that sounds terrifying. That sounds horrible. Especially, as you said earlier, being in somebody's basement. I mean, that sounds like literally terrifying.
Yeah. I mean, I was really lucky to make it out of a lot of these things. I mean, I've never had like any scares, but I've, definitely got some vibes. But really it's just about making sure that you communicate what your goals are for each photo shoot beforehand. I think that's important. So that way you're not surprised when you show up and they're like telling you that you're going to be shooting in lingerie and you're not comfortable with that.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So yeah, just managing the expectations. That makes sense. Not saying that you're gonna, just shoot some sort of lifestyle thing and then surprise we're actually doing this naked when they show up or something.
It could happen. There's some photographers that definitely go down that route, and it's just like, no.
Like with it being a surprise, like it's just gonna make it all better or something. That's horrible. So from the photography standpoint, I kind of want to know. I'm sorry, not from the photography standpoint, from the model standpoint, working with so many photographers as you have, is there anything that you have recognized aside from things like, the rolling cart and whatnot? What makes a good professional photographer from a less than professional photographer? Are there any key things?
I would just say the quality in the photos, honestly. Just anybody can take a great photo, especially with today's equipment. But if you don't know how to edit that so that it looks like it's from 2020 rather than like, 2009, I feel like that's a huge thing that will differentiate if you're, good professional photographer and just not.
Mm-hmm. From a technical standpoint, as the photographer now, what do you think that is? Is that something like off-camera flash? Is that something like V-flats? Like what does that mean? How do we increase the quality of our images?
I would say that it definitely depends on the type of lighting that you're going to use, but also I feel like it depends on how thick your level of frequency separation is. And I say thick because you know exactly what I mean. Sometimes it's literally just like someone just smudged the whole skin on a picture, and I would say that is it, the editing techniques.
The editing technique. I mean, that's something that we didn't even get into today, and unfortunately, we're running out of time here. And I wish that we did have time for that. So I'll have to bring it back on, and we'll talk about that here in the future. But yeah, obviously, editing has got to be a big part of this. As it's not, as I'm sure, rarely you're just taking the photos and then delivering them right away, right? They all pretty much require some sort of retouching and editing. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, I personally retouch a lot. I know a lot of my friends that are photographers that barely retouch anything. And I wish I could be more like them because that would just save me so much time. At the beginning, like being able to retouch was definitely a godsend because I made a lot of mistakes, but I was able to fix them in the editing process. So I've learned to kind of like minimize my mistakes. But, you know, as a new photographer, these things happen. You know, you do make the mistakes. But if you're a professional and you're just making the mistakes in the editing process, I feel like that's an easy fix.
Why is that? Why do you think that's easier than, are you saying that it's easier than the photography side of it?
Well, I feel like if you're a good photographer and you are bad at editing, you can just learn to like edit. But if you're shooting bad photography, which I was at the beginning, and you didn't know how to edit that out, like you just have like bad on top of bad and your photo's just not gonna get good. You know, at least with editing, you can make anything look decent.
Okay, so for new photographers listening right now, focus first on editing or focus first on the photography?
I would say learn both, but so you know what to fix.
Both, so you
Let's
know
say
the
that.
fix?
So like if you're making mistakes while you're doing photography, you should be able to recognize that this is a mistake and you should know how to edit out that mistake. But I think it takes you recognizing, you know, that this is not how it should be.
Yeah. So last question here for you, and it's a simple one. Is there any sort of common bad info that you hear being taught to new photographers about working with models?
Not that I can think of. I mean, there's like I said, there's just so many. There's like a wide range of what's a model now. You know, so it's really hard to say that. I just don't think that there is any specific thing that I've heard about working with models.
Well, then, before I let you go, is there anything that you would tell to a new aspiring photographer who's looking to start working with models?
Yeah, I would say don't be afraid to reach out to people who would obviously, you know, they don't need to be a top model, but someone who feels comfortable in front of the camera. If you are a new photographer and you're wanting to work with a model, the benefit is that these models are comfortable in front of the camera and they know how to pose. And so if you're new, you can focus more on your camera and working, you know, your exposure and all of these things and trying out cool stuff, because you don't have to worry about the person on the other side of the camera necessarily, you know, because they're already doing their thing and you can focus on your photography. So that's a great way to kind of like get yourself to grow and level up when you only have to focus on one thing when it comes to the portraits.
I don't think that I could have said it any better myself, Tori. I want to say, obviously, thank you so much for coming on today. And before I let you go, can you let the listeners know where they can follow you online and check out your own work?
Yes, so you can follow me at Victorious STL, Victorious like when you win a game. I'm
That's
on
the
Instagram.
Dodgers. Sorry, go
The
on.
Dodgers.
That's the Dodgers. Victorious.
Yes, Victorious STL. STL is for St. Louis. That's where I live. And I'm on Instagram. That's where I post most of my stuff. I do a little bit of editing videos on TikTok. And I also am launching a new YouTube channel once I launch my studio, but that's in the works. So Yeah.
Wow, lots of exciting stuff coming from you. Well, I'm excited. Well, again, Tori, I have to say thank you so much for coming on and sharing everything that you did today, and I look forward to keeping up with you here in the future. What I tell you, this is a good one, right? We got a little bit of a different perspective, and that is always nice to have. No matter what, no matter how far along you are as a photographer, as you heard me many times in this interview, I'm pretty oblivious to the whole world that she is in, and even as a self-proclaimed beginner, she is miles ahead of where I am. So we always have something to learn, no matter what it is that we are doing. So my biggest takeaway from this episode right here with Tori was just how much of a harmonious relationship you really need to have with your models. You can really make your life and your shoot much better if you just simply give them everything that they need to be prepared. When you think about models, sometimes there is hair and makeup involved. Sometimes there is some sort of theme involved. And just making sure that they're on the right page is really going to pay off for you in the final photos. And also, this really shouldn't need to be said, but please don't use your camera to exploit anybody or make them feel uncomfortable. It's not cool. In fact, it's very, very uncool. So that is it for this episode. And again, do not forget to do your business a favor. Check out the Contract Vault. You will find all of the photography contracts that you need right at your fingertips at www.thecontractvault.com and use promo code BPP for Beginner Photography Podcast for 20% off your first month. That's pretty solid. So until next week, I want you to make do. Make more, do more, and make do with what you got, because I promise you it's better than you think. Talk soon.
Thank you for listening to the Beginner Photography Podcast. If you enjoy the show, consider leaving a review in iTunes. Keep shooting, and we'll see you next week.